Welcome. We're on the second half, week 5, Coleman's 2015 certified SBA 7A loan servicing training. Lance, we're in lockdown here. There's helicopters and police cars, and they're looking for burglars. So if we go off the air suddenly, either we are the victim or the victee. I don't know.
You know, Bob, in Northwest Arkansas, we don't go into lockdown mode very often.
Let's see. We all know how to ask questions. Thank you all for joining us. And let's go to the poll questions. Have you ever had trouble getting a deferment for more than 90 days approved on a loan that was sold in the secondary market? I like that question.
You know, it's a great question because in dealing with loans that are sold on the secondary market, sometimes servicing actions can be a bit more challenging. And on a deferment, if it's less than 90 days, it's unilateral. You don't have to get approval from the secondary market. But if it's more than 90 days, it requires submitting to Coleman and getting the investor to approve it. And my experience, Bob, is it's a mixed bag. Sometimes I've had trouble, and sometimes I haven't.
No one's had that issue. What percentage of the time do you think it's an issue?
You know, I think a lot of it depends on the investor. Most of the investors are more interested in the borrower being able to pay the loan back because their return depends on that.
Yeah, right.
But there have been a couple of circumstances where the borrower needed an extended deferment to work through. One example, Bob, there was a manufacturing company that was having utility issues, and a 6-month deferment was critical to their livelihood, and the investor declined it. Now, for our servicing gurus out there, that's not the end of the world. You can go to SBA and request an emergency repurchase in a circumstance like that, because the SOP clearly states that in a circumstance where the investor will not approve a servicing action that's critical to the viability of the business, that you can go to SBA, ask them to purchase it back.
So the investor shot themselves in the foot.
But the problem with that, Bob, is it's not quick. You've got to get SBA to buy it back and then submit the servicing action. So, you know, I'm glad to see that our participants have not had that issue, but I've had it a couple times.
For that 6-month deferment, how much interest does SBA guarantee? Are we still stuck at 120 days? Was that the issue?
Well, in this case, the loan's not in liquidation, but it's still 120 days.
Okay, great. Thank you. How do you normally determine a protective bid on a foreclosure? You got 3 options. We take the original appraisal, we take the default appraisal, I can't speak today, or we compare the net recoverable value to the default appraised value.
You know, Bob, the primary reason I asked this question is just to bring up the fact that SBA does have in the SOP 5057 specific instructions on protective bids. And it's important for our servicing group to understand that there are some rules. And the SBA rule states that you look at the default appraisal, or I'm sorry, the SBA rule states that you look at the net recoverable value in the default appraisal, but that net recoverable value or the loan balance, whichever number is smaller, should be your protective bid.
Your students are learning well, Lance. Good for you. When you provide a deferment for an SBA loan customer, do you defer? Principal?
I think the reason, Bob, you know, I was a Small Business Development Center director, and I've spent my life helping small businesses get started and expand and succeed. And one thing I want to encourage our servicing group to understand, you know, there are a lot of times when I see banks do a principal-only deferment, they still ask for the interest payments, and the challenge with that is that's great when that's only what's needed, but there are a lot of times when they need real cash flow relief and they need a principal and interest deferment. So I just wanted to see what our group typically does.
Do you have a best practice, or is it it depends?
I think it's dependent, Bob, on the individual situation with the small business. You know, my personal feeling is if you're going to defer the payment, make sure and defer enough that it will have a positive impact on the business and increase its chances for viability in the future. And if it requires deferring both principal and interest, do it.
Yeah, I would probably be a little bit more old school, and I would want some skin in the game. I want something on a monthly basis.
Well, and SBA's SOP does talk about during a deferment period, a good practice is to get some level of payment.
Something.
So let's say you have a $6,000 payment. The business is in a really tough spot. They really need the full payment deferment. Ask them to pay $250 a month. And SBA's thought behind that is to keep them in the normal habit of paying a monthly payment.
I had a couple of deals back in the day where we gave them full deferments. Never worked. The company was dead. We simply extended the agony.
Well, and if you read if you read the SOP 5057 and its discussion about deferment, one thing that it definitely cautions SBA lenders on is a deferment needs to be an answer to a temporary problem in cash flow. You shouldn't do a deferment if they have a cash flow issue that can't be resolved.
Good. Excellent.
You know, a great example.
I wish you had told me that 50 years ago.
A great example, Bob, of one that I worked on, there was a retail clothing operation. And the State Highway Department decided to tear up the road in front of that.
I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
And they were an excellent business, good cash flow, and suddenly when the road got tore up and customers didn't have access, you know, they had some challenges with cash flow. Well, as soon as the road was fixed, they were fine. And the road was going to be repaired in 6 months, so a 6-month deferment made great sense.
Perfect. On your SBA loans that are more than 60 days past due, have you prepared a liquidation plan? Yes, no, we do not have a loan that's 60 days past due. We should add a fourth option. What is a liquidation plan?
You know, Bob, I would love to see everybody say option 3. It means they have exceptional SBA portfolios. One thing I'll share with you, having built SBA lending departments in 3 banks, as we all know, man, this is an incredible group. Look at
your students are taking your admonitions to heart.
You know, Bob, I'll tell you from reviewing files throughout the country, this is an exceptional group of SBA loan servicers because
you're saying the industry best practice isn't 60 days liquidation plans?
The best practice is not always followed throughout the country. You know, because a liquidation plan in a majority of circumstances does not require SBA approval, quite often you'll find a loan in liquidation that does not have one. So I take my hat off to the group. Great job. You're doing what you're supposed to.
Last question. Do you have to get approval from SBA on a liquidation plan on a 7A loan that is not PLP? Should they be PLP or? I'm already answering 3. Why are you asking this? Where are you going with this, Lance?
Well, I think we just answered the question, and I know the group will get this one correct. If it's a CLP loan, which are almost no CLP loans anymore, right, you have to get the liquidation plan approved. Otherwise, a liquidation plan is not required to be approved by SBA, but it is a needed document in your loan file.
So I'm still confused. So are we answering it right? Are we wrong? And be more specific. How about not a PLP loan, but just a regular GP loan? What's
a regular GP loan? If it's 60 days past due, you need to prepare a liquidation plan, but right, it does not require SBA's approval.
Fine. Okay.
It needs to be in file because that liquidation plan is where you calculate the net recoverable value, and that net recoverable value number becomes important in the entire liquidation process, including, we talked earlier about protective bids. You have to have a net recoverable value calculation to determine what the correct protective bid will be.
Lance, I notice you're not wearing your Razorback shirt today. Is there a reason why? Well,
Bob, I'll tell you, the bank sends out a weekly email telling us that today was Razorback Shirt Day, and I was at a political function last night shaking hands with the governor and some other state legislators, and I missed my email until this morning. So
I thought it was because of the performance of your team last week.
Come on, Bob.
But all right, tell me about week 5.
Bob, that's tough.
I know.
Week 5, we talked about deferments. I think deferment is probably one of the more common servicing actions, both in regular servicing and in liquidation servicing. We talk about dealing with senior liens. I think it's important to understand how to properly deal with senior liens, especially in a world we live in of SBA lending, where SBA frequently asks for a junior lien on a piece of property, and I find myself asking why. Also, how to put a loan into liquidation, and just started discussing the liquidation plan. So very important information for properly servicing your SBA loan.
Is it fair to say this is the most important week for servicing?
You know, Bob, being somebody that loves servicing SBA loans, and these people are now saying he's strange. He loves servicing SBA loans, but we've got a group of servicers, so I hope you love servicing SBA loans as well. I don't know that there is a week that's more important than another, but getting paid on the guarantee, and I want to make this point, banks make SBA loans with the desire to get paid on the guarantee if they go into default. This week is important because getting the loan put into liquidation properly, doing your liquidation plan, sets up the liquidation process and helps you to do it correctly and avoid those repairs that could occur.
Very good. Give us a preview of week 6, Lance. Oh, I'm sorry. I am not following the script. Preparing for the site visit. It states it is a unilateral decision to order a new appraisal or not based upon prudent lending. The example given was if the appraisal is older than 12 months, we should order a new one. It was stated as a guidance. I guess.
Well, my response to that is when a loan goes into liquidation, in most cases, Bob, you don't have an appraisal that's less than 12 months old.
Right.
You need a default.
Hopefully you don't. Hopefully you don't.
You need a default appraisal. When a loan goes into liquidation, the first 2 steps especially if there's commercial real estate involved, my first 2 steps or 3 steps: get the site visit done, get a new appraisal ordered, and get the environmental going. And it's important to understand that you have to have a new environmental study when a loan is in liquidation, because when you get to the point of a foreclosure, you cannot take title to the property without that default appraisal. And the default appraisal comes into play when you're calculating your net recoverable value. And I've got to be honest, I worked on a liquidation case the other day. The original appraisal was like $3.9 million. The default appraisal came in at $2 million. So, Bob, if you calculated a net recoverable value based on the original appraisal, you're going to be overbidding on the property significantly, and SBA's not going to like that.
Lance, with the default appraisal, do we have to use the same alphabet soup of appraisers, all those letters after their names?
The same appraisal requirements that are found throughout the 5010 and the 5057 come into play here.
Unilateral liquidation servicing actions. Ordering a default appraisal, this is required. Are these the answers, Joseph? I don't see the questions.
Well,
I'll let you. I don't know where
the answer to the question is, if a loan goes into default, unless you have a very current appraisal that you just ordered, you need to order a new default appraisal.
Okay.
It's talked about in the SOP, and it's required to have an accurate calculation of the net recoverable value, which, again, I can't overemphasize the importance of a good calculation of the net recoverable value.
Great, very good. Sorry for the confusion, everyone. Let's move on to week 6 and get out of that mess.
We're going to continue to talk about putting the loan into liquidation. We'll talk about the site visit, some of the requirements there, how to work with the borrower once the loan goes into default. And as we all know, Once you put a loan in default and you send a demand letter, the borrower becomes more challenging to work with. And then we'll talk about the workout plan. If you look throughout the SBA SOP, there's several instances where SBA indicates that their objective is to find a way for the borrower to repay the loan. So putting a loan into liquidation does not always mean that you're going to take possession of the collateral, sell it, apply it to the loan. In quite a number of circumstances, it means that you're going to move into a workout arrangement with the customer to give them an opportunity to get back on their feet and to repay their loan. And just today, Bob, I had a loan that I had in workout for a 7-month period. And doing a workout properly is critically important because it requires a written workout plan, and it requires certain things be included in that written workout plan, and we'll cover it. But in this particular case, we went through a 7-month workout plan. They made 4 consecutive on-time payments, and today I got it transferred back into regular servicing. So that's a great example of a loan that went in liquidation, not for a true liquidation. The borrower complied with the workout plan as agreed, and now it's back into regular service.
What was the secret that turned them around?
Well, I think so many banks don't study the SOP 5057 and the things that you can do during a workout plan. We used a combination of servicing actions. We re-amortized and extended the maturity of the loan within SBA's guidelines. We provided a interest-only deferment for 6 months. But we used 2 or 3 different servicing actions in the workout plan to give them some relief. And again, they complied with all the requirements. And the great thing about a workout plan is you, at that point, have a cooperative borrower. You can fix any exception that exists, and that's one of the requirements of a workout plan. If you go into a written workout plan agreement with the borrower, they're required to fix whatever needs fixed related to loan documentation.
Good, good. Do we have any additional questions? We're clear. Hey, everyone, have a nice weekend. Lance, talk to you next week.
Have a great weekend.